Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be recommending 5 books that are perfect to read in the month of October. All of them have some sort of spooky or creepy vibe to them, and I have some suggestions for middle grade, YA, and adult. But before we go ahead and get on into the books, if you are not already subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, as well as the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I post new bookish content. I post new videos every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday, and sometimes other days throughout the week. Also, don't forget to check down in the description box below for links to all of my social media, my Buddy Read Discord, and my Patreon, where you can be entered into winning book giveaways. I'm going to be starting with my middle grade recommendations first, and that is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. To be fair, I am not a huge Neil Gaiman fan. I've read, I think, 4 of his books and just decided that his books are not for me. But I do think Coraline kind of encompasses a really spooky mood. But if you're not familiar with Coraline, this follows our main character, and she's a child, and she and her parents move into this old house. And everything about Coraline's life feels a little bit lackluster. She feels like her parents don't spend a lot of time with her, pay attention to her. She's a little bit bored. And one day she finds this portal in her house to kind of like an alternate reality with a new other mother that looks exactly like her mom, father, and everything looks the same. And this other mother is creepy. Like in this book, she's described as having like no eyes, and there's buttons sewn on where her eyes are. And like that in itself always creeps me out. But then the other mother is like overly nice to her, and right away you realize that there's some ulterior motives going on. And this other mother turns into this monster that wants to keep Coraline on this side of the realm and basically take away Coraline's freedoms. And she has to like fight this monster to get back, to her own family. And one of the things I like about this book is the theme of just not taking what you have for granted, because I feel like Coraline's, ungratefulness is kind of what led her in this situation. And I think it's a really good message for all of us, regardless of what age we are, not just children. So despite my love-hate relationship with Neil Gaiman, I would recommend this for any age to read around the spooky October season. And it's super short, definitely readable in one sitting. The next book is a YA book, and that is Small Favors by Aaron A. Craig. I do have a full review for this. I will link that up in the cards if you're interested in checking it out. And please do not let this bright, pretty cover fool you. This is a fantasy horror, and there are some creepy elements in this book. This is the same author as House of Salt and Sorrows, which I read and loved, and that is another fantasy horror that there are some scenes that just... But in this book, we are following a main character named Ellery, and she lives in this small, secluded village kind of in the middle of the mountains, and it was established by like original group of people centuries ago. And they said when they first settled this village that they had been hunted by these monsters in the woods. And as time has gone on, people have started to think that these monsters were actually myths and they didn't actually exist. But there's been a couple of supply runs that have gone out into the forest, and none of them have come back. And the ones that have come back, weren't the people, but the animals, and they were all mutilated and, mutated. And so something's going on in this forest. And there are like some creepy forest elements in this book. And the village does keep these large bonfire type things around the village to warn them or to scare off any monsters that might come out of the forest. And there's also these chimes that they put in the branches of trees to warn them of, danger. The real creepy parts of this book actually weren't so much the fantasy elements, but the human elements. So there are these evil fantasy creatures that are able to influence humans, and they are able to influence them to make them more evil. So I guess you can equate that kind of to like, the devil or demons who are negatively influencing people. And they do so in this book in horrible ways. In fact, to the point where the entire structure of this village, the entire society completely falls apart and is destroyed by evil. It is powerful and disturbing, the types of things that these villagers say to each other, do to each other, just from pure evil of heart. Like, it's almost like their human nature, the goodness of their human nature is completely erased, and all that's left is just corruption. And it's powerful. Like, it was really disturbing, just the idea that something like that could happen, and just how people that have known each other their whole lives, and this village had to rely on each other. There's no one else around to help them, how they just turned on each other in violence. And essentially, that's how the book ends. But I mean, there's more to it. I'm not going to spoil it, but that's a big part of this book. So while you do have the fantasy elements that's dark and creepy, and these evil fantasy characters are described super dark and super creepy, I think the more spooky element of this book is just the evilness of humans. So I actually recommend this book for all ages if you're looking for a good October read with a dark, creepy forest and dark themes. Next, we have Gallant by V.E. Schwab, and this is a YA standalone fantasy that was published this year. And first off, this book is super atmospheric, and it does have drawings and images and things in the book that kind of adds to the spookiness of it. And we're following a girl named Olivia, and she lives in an orphanage. Her mother died, and Olivia really doesn't know much about her family. And once she turns 18, she gets a letter from an uncle, I believe it's an uncle or a cousin, inviting her to the family estate known as Gallant. And when she gets there, after she's released from the orphanage, like everyone says that they never sent a letter to her and they're not really receptive of her. But Olivia doesn't really have anywhere else to go, so she decides to dig into her mother's journal, which is the only thing that she has of her mother's. And at first, the journal seems completely normal as she's writing about, her daughter and her life. And then slowly and slowly, it looks like her mother's descending into madness as things start happening. So there are like tidbits of the journal in this that Olivia is reading, and Olivia decides to decode the journal to figure out what happened to her mother, and also learns that her family is hiding this huge secret that has to do with almost like a portal world. And this is definitely a portal fantasy, so if you like that, recommend it. But the reason that I would recommend this for the October season is that it's spooky. Victoria Schwab is known for writing extremely atmospheric books. She's got gorgeous prose. So you have this portal world, this darkness to it. You have this family that has all these secrets. You have this dark, creepy house called Gallant. And there's a lot of mystery in this book. It's a super quick read. It's intriguing and one that I think goes perfectly with the season. Next, we have Final Girls by Riley Sager. This is an adult thriller, and I do have a full review for this book. If you're interested in checking it out, I'll leave that up in the cards. And the reason that I decided on Final Girls is because this follows a girl named Quincy, and she was the survivor of a mass murder in the woods when she was in college, about 18 years old, and she was the only one to survive. And she really kind of blacked out almost everything that happened that night at this cottage in the woods because it was so traumatic. And she's called a final girl because if you think about like horror films, there's always like that one girl left standing. So that's why they're called final girls. And there are a couple other girls, two specifically, that also face similar situations as Quincy and were final girls. So they kind of, talk to each other and because they're the only ones that can understand each other. We also learned that there's a lot more that went on at this cottage during this mass murder that Quincy doesn't remember and isn't right. So the reason I think this is a good Halloween read is because it literally involves like a guy walking around murdering people with a knife at this cottage in the middle of the woods where everyone's secluded. So that is literally like your quintessential horror movie. And Quincy goes back there and all these memories come flooding back, and it's creepy whenever Riley Sager describes Quincy like sitting in the room and hearing the guy outside, knowing she's about to get murdered, and just like the thoughts that are going through her head. It was disturbing. It was creepy. And then obviously we have Quincy herself. We don't know if she's reliable because she's blacked everything out. There's an awesome reveal at the end that I should have seen coming and totally didn't. And then we have like other plot lines that Riley Sager adds in that really add to the story and embellish it. So there's just a lot of like spooky atmospheric elements to this book. So it's definitely great to read around Halloween. And lastly, we have The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. It's been a minute since I've read this book, but I remember really, really enjoying it and really finding the themes super, super deep and philosophical. And this is a Gothic classic, and I really enjoy Gothic classics. But if you're not familiar with this book, it follows our main character named Dr. Jekyll, and he is struggling with reconciling the two aspects of human nature, the good side and the evil side. So he decides to basically allow his evil side to come out and manifest itself as Mr. Hyde. And this character goes around like doing these deplorable things, like he beats people and like he's violent and horrible. And I just thought it was such a great commentary on like the duplicity of human nature. And, if we give into one side of human nature, will we be completely transformed? Are we inherently evil? Can we ever allow goodness to overpower evil? And what was really powerful is when Dr. Jekyll allows Mr. Hyde to take over, kind of solidifying the truth that we cannot overpower our evil nature. So there's just a lot of, ideas in this book that really make you think whether you agree or don't agree with them. Plus, it's short, it's creepy, it's gothic, it's a classic, and one that can easily be read in the month of October. All right, you guys, that is it for 5 books that I think you should read during the spooky Halloween season. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, and I will see y'all in another video soon. Goodbye.